Welcome to the Contrarians, where we are right and you are wrong. I'm Julio.
And I'm Alex. Here on the show, we rage against the Rotten Tomatoes machine. For the first half of each episode, Contrarians Corner, we trash the fresh red tomatoes and praise the rotten green splotches, making our case any way we can.
The aptly titled Real Talk serves as the second half of each episode. This is where we discuss our true feelings on the movie we're covering. For more information on our podcast and to browse past episodes, you can head over to our website, wearethecontrarians.com.
From there, you can also access our Patreon and merchandise, because capitalism.
If you enjoy our attempts at comedic film discussions, we encourage you to subscribe and leave us a review on whatever podcatcher you use.
If you'd like to reach out to us directly, that's what social media is for. You can find us on most platforms as @ContrarianPrime.
You can also see what we look like if you go to youtube.com/@ContrarianPrime, and you can contact us by email at wearethecontrarians@gmail.com.
I think that covers it.
Then it's time for the podcast. And we are recording for Contrarians Corner for My Cousin Vinny.
Hello and welcome to the Contrarians, where we're right and you're wrong. My name is Alex, joined as always, I guess, by my cousin Julio in this particular situation. A guy I know who's here to help me out and baby walk me through a podcast, Julio Oliveira. Julio, the summer of bangers rages on, and we're here today to talk about a film that not only earned someone an MTV Movie Award, not only earned an Academy Award, but really was their arrival into the ether of celebrity and, that of the A-list actor. And she has been there ever since. And she now, swims in the pool of wealth that is the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Thank you for acknowledging that.
It's Marisa Tomei. It's Joe Pesci. It is Herman Munster. It is My Cousin Vinny.
An even bigger thank you for acknowledging that Herman Munster is in this movie.
We can't stop talking about the Munsters, it seems, recently.
No, it's a Contrarian's synchronicity. It all comes together sometimes.
And of course, I'm sorry, the Karate Kid, Ralph Macchio.
Well, of course, there's only two roles that Ralph Macchio has ever played. Daniel LaRusso and then Cousin Vinny's cousin. The cousin that doesn't have a name. But I was going to say that while I appreciate and I understand the context that you just provided and it makes sense for the world at large, I think that those of us that know a little bit more about the history of cinema, we know that the Marisa Tomei journey started with a movie that we already covered in the show, and that would be the Sylvester Stallone comedy Oscar.
It's true. It's true. It's damn true, as Kurt Angle would say. But what we're doing here, the MTV Movie Award she won was literally titled Breakthrough Performance.
Which is what bothers me. That implies that she did not break through with Oscar.
Yeah, you can go back and listen to that episode. I think we had some guests on for that one, and there were certainly varying degrees of appreciation for that movie.
Right, but did we all agree that?
Yes, we did agree. She was great. Holy shit. I never knew she was in The Toxic Avenger, which I've seen that movie like 3 times. Okay, here you go. Her scene was removed from the theatrical release, but it appears in the director's cut released in 2002. Interesting. But that was nearly a decade prior to My Cousin Vinny. And yeah, Oscar was only the year prior. So I get where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think we could assume that Oscar got her the job at My Cousin Vinny. Like she was doing the accent in Oscar too, right?
Yes. Yeah.
The Imogen Poots accent.
Jonathan Lynn saw that and he was like, I found it. I found the missing piece. He had he and Dale Launer, the writer on this, had been waiting for years until they found their white whale, and they watched Oscar and realized it was time to pull the trigger on this thing.
The original cast also features Stallone as Vinny, but then he had to drop out to do another Rocky movie.
Oh, man. That would have been brutal. Watching Sly try to traverse courtroom drama and navigation. All right. We are here today to discuss My Cousin Vinny, a collection of that guys, if there ever was one. And a film that is for children of the 90s and kids that watched Seinfeld at 6 p.m. every day after school, like myself, I think their relation to My Cousin Vinny will be the Marisa Tomei story arc with George Costanza. It's a film that has certainly penetrated pop culture. The cover of, or the poster, I should say, which eventually became the VHS cover, that's one of those, Julio, that's burned into the brain. Like that's up there with the other ones I always mention, be it Frighteners or Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Child. I remember the poster specifically going into our local video store when that movie became available, because I think my parents rented it. It was one of those, they waited for me and my sister to go to sleep to watch it, because I do remember like my dad raving about this movie to his friends when I was a kid. But that poster, I just remember thinking as a child, it looked like some boring courtroom drama.
I was going to say, thinking, who are these people?
Yeah. And you know, she can't wear that in a courtroom. You know, that's my thought from the poster itself. The tagline for those keeping score at home: there have been many courtroom dramas that have glorified the great American legal system. This is not one of them. It's a movie I remember the hype and visuals surrounding very well from my childhood. It's a movie that I was trying to remember when we talked about it in our little like preview for this. I might have watched it like on TV when I was a teenager or something, but I certainly didn't retain that Herman Munster was the judge, and I didn't, retain a lot of like the comedic beats from this, and also Marisa Tomei Fit Watch, which is much like Chuck Liddell in our Tough 20 journey. You got to keep an eye out for what Marisa Tomei is coming into scene wearing in this, man. I'm telling you.
Trendsetter. I am with you, Alex, in that I know that I hadn't watched this before, but I knew Marisa Tomei had won the Oscar for it. I knew the clip that they used, her Oscar clip, which is unsurprisingly when she's on the stand. Yeah. And I knew that Fred Gwynne was in it because his In Memoriam clip was one of the scenes from this movie where he's as the judge. I don't remember which one they used, but I remember thinking that it was wild that it was not a Herman Munster clip. I guess it makes sense because the Oscars are about movies, so they would use a movie clip, not a TV clip. But still, I just remember thinking, that's Herman Munster, and apparently he's been in a movie. And then eventually I made the connection. It was My Cousin Vinny. So a very distant third was just the notion that this was a Joe Pesci vehicle. And I was watching the movie today and writing notes on all the many, many things that don't work in it. I realized, there are some, but there aren't that many Joe Pesci vehicles. And we may find ourselves, speaking of Seinfeld, we might find ourselves in another George Costanza situation where, some people are not meant to be quarterbacks, as you said before. They're just meant to provide support.
Excuse me, but I think a modicum of gratitude would not be out of line here.
Before we get into our movie du jour here, we recently received some feedback on recent episodes.
Some death threats.
Some death threats, yes. How dare you talk shit about Harrison Ford? No, it's, I know a lot of people that have reached out to me in the past about episodes don't necessarily listen in order. They'll, pick and choose and then kind of just have like, hey, I just listened to this. But it's never really like long form feedback or anything of like, something to relay from the episode. But I did get over the past week a couple of quick texts that I just wanted to go ahead and share. My buddy Adam messaged that he had listened to the Fugitive episode, and Adam was familiar with the TV show itself and had watched it and said that it had a lot of the same beats. He says he doesn't recall if the TV show wrapped with one of his colleagues being behind his wife's murder, but he said the show was very indicative of the 60s and that it was very slow moving.
The complete opposite of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't this 2-hour just fuckfest that the movie was. And I guess I know what he means by that too, because I have watched, we've watched movies from the 60s. Like the pacing was just completely different than what we're used to.
People had more time.
Yeah, this is true. It did make me interested in what, maybe checking out an episode or two of the show. And then someone who's very familiar around these parts, our buddy Steve, he messaged me earlier this week. I just listened to the Contrarians episode on The Wrestler. Julio was longing for an update on someone in the Rams' position in the current climate, trying to use socials to stay relevant. It occurred to me that Matt Cardona is Ram 2K25, with the added sting that his wife is one of the more over characters in New York. That means the WWF, while he's still going through tables in Hoboken. Matt Cardona was a WWE wrestler for 10 years or some shit. And then at the beginning of COVID, he was one of the casualties of the fucking axe that came through and released a ton of guys. And he was one of them. And he is a carny amongst carnies. Like, I saw his merch table in Vegas at WrestleCon, and you know the scene in The Wrestler where Rams got his tapes and his 8x10s and his Polaroid. I mean, Cardona's got that plus a million figures and all this shit, and he does work independents that range very much like The Wrestler. I thought that was a really great call out from Steve. Of he'll wrestle these venues that have 1,500 people there and it looks great, and then also a fucking fair that 17 people paid admission for. But he has kind of made that grind work on the independent level without coming across as like, oh, that's sad. That's a guy from yesteryear. So anyway, as always, we appreciate all of y'all that listen to the podcast. And if you ever have a quick thought or a long form thought, don't hesitate to send it in. We'll read it out here on the air. Now, Julio, it is March 13th of 1992. A missed opportunity for Paramount, although they had already given up the franchise at this point. No Jason heading to the box office that weekend. My Cousin Vinny hits theaters. 85% on Rotten Tomatoes. Can confirm here from the Rotten Tomatoes website. It is certified fresh based on 61 reviews. Which quotes did you pull for us today?
Fresh quotes from the Rotten Tomatoes website. We're going to start with Carl De Los Santos from Smash Cut Reviews, who says, My Cousin Vinny proves that well-written and superbly delivered jokes belong in comedies. Who was arguing that they didn't?
I thought like there was going to be more to that. And I was like, yes, go on.
Yeah. Generally, that's how comedies work. You write a joke and you deliver it. Ideally, you write it well and you deliver it superbly. Next, Peter Rayner from Los Angeles Times says, as Vincent Gambini, a swaggering, pint-sized New York lawyer who only recently passed the bar on his sixth try, Pesci modulates his usual psycho nuttiness and gives it some recognizably human, even melancholy undertones. Does he, Alex? Or is this just Joe Pesci?
This is 2 years removed. Not even, but we're a little ways removed from Goodfellas. And yeah, he's not like fucking violent in this. It's like
if Tommy had gotten to law school.
Get your fucking shine box. Melancholy is not the word I would use to describe it. His character does point out like the very apparent flaws and issues with the American legal system, specifically in some parts of the country. But at no point,
specifically the South.
Yeah, at no point did I feel melancholic about what was happening.
Yeah, I think that, look, I like Joe Pesci overall, but I think that Peter Rayner is giving him a little too much credit. I think the only time that he has somewhat broken through to where the performance surprised me was in the two Home Alone movies that he's in. Because there I'm like, that's Joe Pesci, but man, that's cartoon Joe Pesci.
Which I'm pretty sure Home Alone 2 was also 1992. It was November of 92, so Pesci had both ends of the year covered.
Next, Variety staff from Variety says, Tomei, sashaying through the proceedings as kind of a sexy hood ornament, creates a buoyant chemistry with her combative BF. In what world do you get away with comparing Marisa Tomei to a sexy hood ornament? That's
some pretty psychotic shit right there, man.
Variety, the entire staff of Variety got together. That was the best they could come up with. It's Academy Award winner, Marisa Tomei. MTV Movie Award Breakthrough Performance winner, Marisa Tomei. Not a sexy hood ornament. And we're going to close with Christopher Knoll from filmcritic.com, who says, very funny fish out of water flick and, Oscar notwithstanding, generally underrated. Alex, can a movie that won an Academy Award be called underrated? It's part of pop culture. It's woven into the fabric of cinema.
Yeah. I think a nomination, you could still get away with calling something underrated. But a win, it's there forever, man.
It's how many people know of My Cousin Vinny, not having watched My Cousin Vinny, just because Marisa Tomei won the Oscar. I know I was one of them.
That's the whole joke in those Seinfeld episodes. Is George keeps watching My Cousin Vinny because he has a thing for Marisa Tomei, and people are like, My Cousin Vinny, isn't Marisa Tomei in that? That's like kind of the joke.
Did they end up hooking up? I know that she likes him and then he blows it, but does he blow it before or after they hook up?
They don't hook up because she has that part where she's like, George, how's a guy like you? So she says something like, so nice and so bald, not already taken. And then he's like, well, the thing is, I'm sort of engaged. And that's what like blows the whole thing.
I just remember. See, what I was remembering was his bit about how either he has underwear for every day of the year or he thinks it would be a great idea to have underwear every day of the year, right? And she seems fascinated by it.
It's and then also like when Susan dies, he calls her like agent and tries to get through to her. It's like, it's George Costanza. My fiance died.
Man, see, it all comes full circle because I started this comparing Joe Pesci's leading man capabilities to those of Jason Alexander's, who, in case you didn't know, starred in a little ditty that we cover here in the Contrarians. It feature an orangutan taking over a hotel. Yes, Dunstan Checks In is a Jason Alexander joint.
Dunstan did indeed check in.
Dunstan didn't get an Oscar nomination, didn't even get a MTV breakthrough performance. But, to close the loop there, I think that Joe Pesci, probably because on the strength of Goodfellas, it's always going to, even if he was not leading movies, he was always going to get a fair number of shots, considerably more than Jason Alexander, even with the power of Seinfeld behind him. But other than that, I think that you can compare both My Cousin Vinny and Dunstan Checks In as the type of movie project that's designed to launch a new protagonist, a new leading man, and it doesn't quite work. Instead, other people in the cast prove to be more bankable or more charismatic. In the case of Jason Alexander, it was an orangutan. In the case of Joe Pesci, it was Marisa Tomei.
This is going to be great. Vinny's first case. So, what can I do to help?
All right. Let's get into it, shall we? While driving through Alabama, New York college students Bill Gambini and Stan Rothenstein, what did you call him, Rothenstein? Stein, what is this Stein? Stop at a convenience store, during which Bill accidentally shoplifts a can of tuna. After they leave, the boys are pulled over and arrested as the shopkeeper has been found robbed and murdered. At the police station, Bill assumes he has been arrested for shoplifting and confesses to being responsible, resulting in him being charged with first-degree murder and Stan as an accessory. Unable to afford a private lawyer, Bill asks for help from his cousin Vinny Gambini, a personal injury lawyer from Brooklyn, who agrees to help the boys. However, they are unaware that Vinny has only just passed the bar to become a lawyer after multiple failed attempts and has no trial experience. Vinny promptly arrives in Alabama with his fiancée, Mona Lisa Vito. This Vinny being Joe Pesci and Mona Lisa, of course, being Marisa Tomei. And if you're curious if the line, my cousin Vinny, is said within the first 15 minutes of the movie, it certainly is.
It's said by the Karate Kid himself, Ralph Macchio, putting on, I guess, a New York accent, right? Is that what's happening?
He's trying. And I do need to call out before I forget that during this portion of it, the sheriff is the first of 3 times I said, hey, that guy in this movie, that being Bruce McGill, who has appeared on the Contrarians in one of our more, I think, at least between you and I, celebrated episodes. Do you know which movie he's been in?
I know Bruce McGill, and I know him from a gazillion things. And I'm sure that episode I called out that he was MacGyver's best friend. But I can't remember when we talked about him on the show.
He plays Bill Banyan in Elizabethtown.
Of course. Because they have that moment where everybody's saying things at the funeral, and then they cut to him. You're always wondering what he did to Mitch, why there was a rift, and they never tell us. Instead, they cut to him apologizing, saying, and for my part of what I did, I am sorry. You're like, but what was it? What did you do? Bruce McGill is great.
Yes, and he plays Sheriff Dean Farley here. I mean, everything we just laid out there this movie from square one paints an entirely incompetent picture of law enforcement in the South.
Dude. There are movies about the South, and then there are movies about the South. So you have stuff like The Last Picture Show, which it's not like it paints you a pretty picture of the South, but it has a gentle touch, right? It has an affection for his characters. It kind of shows them with all their flaws, but also with their humanity. There's none of that here. Everybody in Alabama, according to this movie, is ignorant, two-faced, and it's also really dumb. It's the worst. And I was like, maybe it's not that bad. But then the movie ended, and it ends with the end credit song is something about the Bible Belt.
She had plans to seduce him if she could. She would loosen a notch in the Bible Belt.
Oh, yeah.
They're really doubling down on the fact that this is the South and it's a movie about the South. And if Joe Pesci was playing some dude from like Texas or, also from the South, so you could at least see that the two sides of it, right? No, but he plays somebody from New York. It was like the only way that these people are going to get their problems sorted out is if somebody, a Yankee, comes in and sets them straight. I had no idea that was part of its legacy. This is, by the way, Alex, did you recognize the name of the director? Because we've talked about him before.
It sounds familiar, but I guess I'm blanking off the top of my head.
Well, it's his first time at bat here on the main feed, but during the Friends Extravaganza, he was on the Patreon feed because this dude directed the whole 9 yards.
Ah.
All those years later, they finally gave him a decent leading man with Matthew Perry.
Oh, I remember because he also directed the Clue movie.
Yep.
So I remember talking about him in that. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is after Clue, before the whole 9 yards. It kind of feels like, if you look at filmography, he made Clue and then he just took that goodwill and wrote it for decades until he got to make a movie with the guy from Friends. So he's a comedy director, which makes it so surprising that this is not as funny as it should be. Like, I remember laughing during the whole 9 yards, and it's been a while since I've watched Clue, but I seem to remember it was kind of quirky and it moved fast, and of course Tim Curry. Now that's a comedy leading man. So a little disappointed that with the pedigree behind the camera, this movie's not funnier.
Tell me what you think about the jail sex humor, because when Pesci shows up to meet the two clients there, his cousin Bill is sleeping, so he's just talking to Stan the whole time, and Stan believes that Joe Pesci's there to force himself upon him in a sexual nature, and then so everything that's being said can be read as a double entendre, and this is Julio's favorite type of comedy. It
is. I mean, not necessarily about prison sexual violence, but the double entendres, the misunderstandings, that's right up my alley. And in fact, the movie opens, I mean, the entire thing, they end up confessing to a crime they didn't commit because of one of those misunderstandings. It's like you said, right? They think that they got pulled over because they stole a can of tuna. Instead, they're getting pulled over because they're suspects of a murder. And there's like, I don't know, 5 minutes, 10 minutes of movie before they actually catch on. And so they're just talking about the murder as if they had stolen a can of tuna, and it's entertaining. I think that the movie needed to decide if that was going to be the tone for the entire movie, where it's just going to be that type of comedy of confusion, or if this was going to be a one-time thing. But instead, they do it here, then they do it again in prison when Joe Pesci shows up to represent them, and Stan think that he's there to, to abuse him. And then it doesn't happen again. That's the first 20, 25 minutes of the movie, and then there's no more of these sort of double entendre confusions through the rest of the movie. I mean, I wish that they committed, because like you said, it is the kind of thing that I can find funny if you get somebody to pull it off. And this kid, by the way, the guy that plays Stan, can't get away from Friends because he is Barry. He plays Rachel's fiance at the beginning of the show. When the show first starts and she leaves her fiance at the altar, that's this dude.
Really?
Yeah. Unlike Ralph Macchio, he actually went on to do other things.
Boy, that's one hell of an ego you've got.
What the fuck is your problem?
Vinny fools the trial judge, Chamberlain Holler, this being played by Fred Gwynn, Herman Munster, into believing he is an experienced New York lawyer who works under the alias Jerry Callow. which that's kind of the evolution of the joke. Is he tells him his name to begin with is Vinny Gambini, and Herman's able to look it up and see that there's no Vinny Gambini. So then he says, no, my name is Jerry Gallo. And when he looks that up, it turns out to be a dead guy. He said, Gallo with a G? I'm Callow with a C. So that's an ongoing joke throughout the movie.
One of many.
Along with Howler repeatedly holding Vinny in contempt for his unprofessional attitude, attire, and ignorance of courtroom decorum, resulting in brief stints in jail. The prosecuting attorney, Jim Trawler III, presents a strong, although circumstantial case against the boys, offering multiple witnesses to their involvement in the murder. Bill and Stan become concerned when Vinny declines to cross-examine the witnesses during the preliminary hearing, resulting in Stan firing Vinny and hiring public defender John Gibbons. So, Julio, one of the big things in this was these local folks that all have the same story that they're going off of that would seemingly incarcerate or, send the boys to the gallows pretty much. It falls apart so quickly that I thought like a better way to go would be some sort of conspiracy, or some like citywide plan to get these city folk, to teach them a lesson for coming in. Cause it really does seem like corruption at one point.
Right. But that would require them to be kind of smart about it. I think that the way that the citizens of this little town in Alabama are depicted in the movie, there is no way that they could get away with a conspiracy. Instead, it turns out that they're just too dumb to realize that they're providing false information or inaccurate information to law enforcement. The movie even hints at it at one point. I think Stan tells Ralph Macchio, tells him, hey, there's no way that they're all lying, so it has to be a conspiracy. Maybe the other way around. He says, it can't be a conspiracy, so it has to be that they're all accidentally lying. I don't know. He brings up the word conspiracy, and I thought, okay, well, I guess Joe Pesci's going to have to do some digging. But in the end, it's such a flimsy case built against him that it doesn't really take a whole lot of effort, which I guess makes sense because Joe Pesci's a pretty bad attorney, as it turns out, or at least a very unseasoned one.
You are right. It is such a bad case that it's like any competent lawyer could have got it dismissed almost immediately. Like there was no forensic evidence and it was a circumstantial, quote unquote confession, that it's kind of shocking it took this much work.
Yeah. I mean, all the witnesses are incredibly unreliable. And here's the thing, Alex, because the problem is that even with the case being that flimsy, it takes Joe Pesci forever to prevail. And most of the movie is just him being an idiot and making mistakes and getting inconvenience. I mean, it's a courtroom drama. Eventually becomes a courtroom drama. But before that, and I guess throughout the entire thing, it's also a fish out of water comedy.
Oh, yeah, because they move hotels several times, and each time there's a new
jokes.
Thing that wakes them up. It's the whistle at the steel mill, I believe it is, to let everyone know it's 5:30, or it's a rooster crowing, or it's an owl at this secluded cabin they're staying at that's waking them up. And, they're New York folk. They've never been exposed to anything like this before.
Well, as much as I like double entendre jokes and, those sort of misunderstandings, what I like even more are courtroom dramas. And I don't find the Joe Pesci and Marisa Tomei just being city people that are at a loss in rural Alabama. Like, I don't find that anywhere near as interesting or amusing as just, man, show me the trial. I want to know why Ralph Macchio has such faith in Joe Pesci. He brings him over, he's telling Stan, don't worry, it's going to happen. He has the Gambini spirit and whatever. But nothing that happens in the first hour and 20 minutes of the movie would indicate to you that Ralph Macchio has any reason to trust his cousin. Because Pesci just can't get a single thing right. Yeah. But wouldn't it be more interesting if you got to see, he can still be a fish out of water, but at least give me something that shows me that there's a reason why this guy actually passed the bar, and why is Marisa Tomei with him? If all you're doing is show me how much of a loser he is the entire time, I'm just wondering, because she seems pretty smart, she seems pretty quick-witted, right? Anybody who's watched a legal drama knows the very basics of how you behave in court, and he can't even get that right. So I just didn't have any patience for it. And I don't know, I mean, maybe it goes a little down a little easier if you find him funny. But that was the other thing. I just don't think that Joe Pesci is that funny. He's just being Joe Pesci. He's just dropping F-bombs and yelling and trying to be menacing. I mean, that's funny maybe the first time, the second time, but especially when you put him right next to Marisa Tomei, who's really funny, it just doesn't work. Did he make you laugh, Alex?
Pesci, not as much as Marisa Tomei. He was certainly overmatched in that regard. Like all their back and forths and, banter and whatnot. I found myself laughing at her, and then just it kind of felt like a watered down version of Pesci. It is an R-rated movie, so he gets to say fuck all he wants and whatnot, but
he doesn't kill anyone.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like he should have taken Trotter out back and just stomped him in the gut or some shit. And
that's what happens when you separate him from Robert De Niro. He just loses his edge.
Did your balls drop off?
Do I have to kill you? What if I was just to kick the ever-loving shit out of you?
Vinny's inexperience with the legal system leads him to try to trick Trotter into sharing evidence until Lisa tells Vinny that he can legally access the prosecutor's information and prompts him to interview the witnesses, which he does. She grows frustrated with Vinny as he promised several years earlier that they would get married when he wins his first case and is worried he never will. Vinny is also eager to prove himself to his mentor, Judge Malloy, who persuaded him to go into law. Easily the funniest line in the entire movie when Vinny thinks he's had a big victory in his case where he gets all of Trotter's documents and comes back, and Marisa Tomei's like, he's supposed to. It's called disclosure, you dickhead. I yelled laughing at that. But with the Vinny character at this point, it's crossing the line from funny incompetence to just frustrating. Yep. It's like, how much longer are we going to go through this?
Yeah. And how is it that I understand it's because it's a movie, and I guess because Herman Munster is just as dumb as everybody else, but that judge should have been able to disqualify him on the basis of providing fake references right away. I don't know why it takes so long. I know throughout the movie, people seem to be communicating through fax a lot, and I guess that's how it was, back in the day. But still, I just couldn't believe that some dude can just waltz into a courtroom in Alabama and lie about his professional history. And he gets away with it. It's not that they put the trial on pause.
Talk about aging poorly. With the internet, we could find this right away.
Right.
I do love getting ahead to the ending. There is a part where Bruce McGill gets a computer report. He's like, we got this printout that says this. It's like the fucking Almost Famous. It only takes, what does he say, 17 minutes a page. But yeah, today, Vinny would have been out of there immediately. Or if at least he knew what he was doing, he would get the fucking trial moved to a neutral battleground. But either way, there's just a lot of things that fail to have relevance in today's technologically advanced society.
It would be funny if people in Alabama would be like, actually, that's how it is. Austin Pendleton, Alex. Another return to the Contrarians, although this one that I celebrate a lot less. Do you know who this guy is?
No.
The public defender.
Okay.
So he's been in 2 movies that we've done before, and I haven't liked his performance in either, to the point where when he showed up in this movie, I was like, fuck, it's that guy. And then I said, well, maybe in this one it'll be different. And no, he's one of the worst characters and worst performances in the movie. Austin Pendleton was Santa Claus in Christmas with the Cranks, and he was the pervy judge in She's Funny That Way. Much older, obviously, in those movies. He
was also in What's Up, Doc, which we covered, and The Muppet Movie, which we covered.
Oh, man, I don't know who he is in The Muppet Movie.
I guess I don't either. But yeah, he's definitely here for shtick in this movie.
Yeah.
His the big punchline is that when he's nervous, he stutters.
Man, he milks that one scene they give him.
I was at a school event in, God, I don't even know if I was a freshman in high school yet. And one of the teacher's husbands was hosting the event. And he thought he was fucking Billy Crystal. And it might have been an award ceremony or a band show or something. But in between performances or whatever the acts were, in between those, he would get up there to introduce the next thing and they would tell a joke. And it is burned into my brain. You know that expression, dying of secondhand embarrassment?
Yes.
He told some joke where like the punchline was this guy was a stutterer, and he took like fucking 7 minutes to tell this joke that got no reaction at the end. And it was a small community I grew up into. The other big thing was he told this joke in our school. There was these twins that were blind, famously so. They like were the only blind people in the school, and they would go and speak to like all grade levels about what it's like to be blind and whatnot. I remember finding it really interesting. I thought I always found Braille interesting. But one of the jokes he told of this shit was, why do blind people typically not commit suicide by jumping off of a building? It scares their dogs. I remember that joke because it was just like there was, you could have heard like a pin fall on a Tempur-Pedic pillow at that point, dude. It was one of the most uncomfortable situations I've been in my life. So I, one, associate that with stuttering jokes, and two, it is why I don't find stuttering jokes funny.
Well, you have successfully provided context that makes the Austin Pendleton performance here not as bad. Still pretty bad, though.
That's a real story that I like. As I was fleshing out my thoughts of why I don't find stuttering funny, and I just had to explain that to you, Julio. So I'm glad that it's on the record now why stuttering jokes do not work for me.
I think that like everything, or maybe almost everything, you can probably successfully deliver a joke that has to do with stuttering. But, you know, execution has a lot to do with it. I don't think Austin Pendleton has it here because him and the director, I guess, seem to think that what's funny is that this public defender is stuttering. And I think we're a little more sophisticated than that as audiences. So you just pointed the camera at this dude while he stutters is not going to make me laugh. And in fact, it gets worse because there's a point where I don't know which word he says, but he kind of spits at the jury. He's in front of the jury box and he like spits. And I was like, that's just, what is this? This is the same movie that has an amazing performance. Even in Contrarians Corner, I'll tell you, it's an amazing performance from Marisa Tomei.
Yeah.
And you get that degraded with this bullshit. And the worst part, Alex, is that he made me laugh at the end with something that had nothing to do with the stuttering. Nothing that had to do with like the big shtick that he'd put on there, which is when it's all over and he's done like blowing it with the witness, he gets back to the defense chair and he tells Rachel's fiance, he goes, well, that was a tough one. Or something like that.
He's a tough one.
Yes.
That was such an understatement. That was like, man, why couldn't his whole scene be like that? You know, or why wasn't his scene funnier so that this was a really good closer? Instead, it's like the one funny moment that he gets. And then thankfully, he gets fired. So he doesn't show up again in the movie.
During the trial, Gibbons' nerves and severe stutter only further damaged to Stan's defense. Meanwhile, Vinny uses an aggressive but perceptive questioning style to discredit Trotter's witnesses, using his knowledge of the cooking time of grits to force one to admit that his perception of when the crime occurred is inaccurate, and the others by questioning their ability to positively identify the suspects due to the obstructions in their sightline and impaired vision. Stan promptly rehires Vinny to defend him. He says, I want him. The next day, Trotter produces a surprise witness, FBI analyst George Wilbur, who in this is played by that guy, James Rebhorn, who, Independence Day? Is he in Independence Day?
Yes. Yeah. I know him from The Game. Oh, well, I mean, I know him from many things, but The Game is what I think of usually because he has kind of a pivotal role in that movie.
Yeah, he's definitely someone who's popped up from time to time, and if you've watched just a handful of movies from the 90s, you'll find him in there. Basic Instinct, Son of a Woman, Carlito's Way. So yeah, he's definitely been here before. Blank Check, that's what I'm thinking of. I always see Independence Day with him, but Blank Check would be the backup.
Is he the blank check?
He is not. Blank Check's a fucking weird movie, by the way, if you've never seen it. Those listening. It's a children's movie that there's a very weird undertone of what's going on in it. So if you have fond memories of it, don't rewatch it and have it ruined for you, because that's what happened to me. It's got Tone Loc, though. Tone Loc's great. George Wilbur testifies that the tire markings at the crime scene match those of the boy's 1964 Buick Skylark, although Vinny makes him admit that the tires are the most used in America. Holler orders a lunch recess and denies Vinny's request for a full day's continuance to properly counter Wilbur's testimony. Stressed by lack of sleep, Holler's hostility, low funds, and the prospect of losing the case, Vinny lashes out at Lisa's efforts to help, but realizes that one of the photos she's taken during their stay, showing the tire marks at the scene, may help the case.
What an asshole, this guy.
At this point, yeah, dude, at this point, it's a really strange ask of the audience, because they're clearly like putting Pesci in this place where you want him to succeed in terms of all the shit that's being piled on top of him. So then the next scene that he has, they have him completely motherfuck Marisa Tomei, and it's like, no, we like her. What are you doing, man? And then you kind of agree with her for running off and not wanting to help him anymore.
It has to be a miscalculation. It has to be that the director, that everybody involved thought that it would be funny to see him lose his shit with Marisa Tomei. I think that they completely underestimated, one, how likable her character is. Because I think that we're supposed to find her annoying, Alex. And that was never that was never the impression I got. I just thought that she was lovely the entire time. And she was very helpful and very funny. Certainly funnier than Pesci, funnier than most of the people in the movie. So I was not primed to find it funny when he dresses her down in such a hostile manner. It's ugly. Like, it's ugly. The thing that he says to her and the way that he treats her. So you're right. It comes at a point where we're finally getting to see him be a good lawyer, right? Like, I timed it, dude. An hour and 20 minutes. That's why I said earlier. It takes a movie an hour and 20 minutes for us to see why Vinny is so special, because that's the first time that he gets a witness on stand and really badgers them and gets them to prove them wrong, basically. Which, by the way, I thought he didn't know grits, and then suddenly he's a grits expert.
You ever had grits, Julio?
I've tried them. That was one of the first things that when I first moved to the States, I was like, what is this? And I did not care for them. Am I losing cred?
No. I mean, I think you'd be the first to admit also you don't have much of a palate for food, like, in general.
Proudly admit it.
I've had grits that are fantastic. Instant grits are not good. That's the whole point with grits, and they're work, so I'm never going to make them. But I have had them at like restaurants and, fine dining places, and I'm like, these are fucking dynamite. Shrimp and grits is fantastic if you get it made like at a high level. But
do you feel that we're missing a scene in this movie then? Because when Pesci first gets to Alabama,
oh yeah,
he's like,
we need him. They need to have a hotel with a little kitchenette, or he needs to be in the kitchen of one of the hotels he's staying at with like his sleeves rolled up and his fucking readers on. And then, he's just watching the water boil and goes, of course.
Right. That's, I don't understand it's such a sudden change. He's a complete klutz the entire hour and 20 minutes until then. And then it's like somebody flipped the switch and now he's a pretty good lawyer. Look, this is real talk, Contrarians Corner. A Few Good Men is probably what I consider the top of the top, the creme de la creme when it comes to courtroom dramas, right? That is a movie that's almost entirely built around a trial, and I think 90% of it takes place in the courtroom. There's not a single bad actor. There's not a single bad line of dialogue. So the bar is high. But I'm going to tell you, like, Pesci, for like a brief series of moments in this sequence where he becomes a good lawyer, I was like, man, there he is. It's like Daniel Kaffee. It's Tom Cruise and A Few Good Men. He's just like badgering them. He's yelling at the grits guy and is like, do you still stand by your 5 minutes? I was just like, what does Cruise say? I want the truth.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
Ignore the question.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
I don't know. I think you made your point.
Are you sure about that 5 minutes?
It's pretty impressive. And so when that happened, I was like, oh, okay. So it was a really long buildup, but at least we're getting to the movie I want. And then, what do you know? Like 5 minutes later, he's chewing poor Marisa Tomei out and just making me turn on him automatically. It's just so contrived because we know that this is just, we're coming into the third act, so they need to break up. Things need to go bad. He runs after her to apologize, but doesn't really make an effort. He's like, I'm sorry. It's like, come on. It's Marisa Tomei. You can try harder than that.
You should.
You should.
Get down on your fucking hands and knees, man.
Yeah. Did you know, you said you don't remember if you'd seen this before, and you certainly didn't remember much, but did you know about the Marisa Tomei iconic scene, like her Oscar clip? Like, because that was my problem. I knew that was coming. So I knew that no matter what, she was going to be instrumental in how he wins the case. So that kind of took away also some of the suspense.
Burned into my brain from the VHS box art that I looked at many times as a child was on the back panel. There's a picture of her like on the stand. So I always remembered that there's like the big climatic scene where she takes the stand. And yeah, having watches at some point in my life, I remember that she does get up there and does the Will Ferrell in Old School where, you know, she becomes the czar all of a sudden. After asking the local sheriff for a favor, local sheriff, give him some credit, that's Bruce McGill. Vinny drags an angry Lisa into the court to testify as an expert witness, as she and her family have worked as mechanics, and she has an encyclopedic knowledge of cars. Looking at the photo, Lisa realizes that only the 1963 Pontiac Tempest, which resembles a Buick Skylark, could have made the tire tracks, thanks to its independent rear suspension and positraction. We get this part here where they educate the crowd on cars, the audience, I should say. Well, the crowd, the peanut gallery and the courtroom as well. Vinny recalls Wilbur, who confirms the information, discrediting his own testimony. The sheriff arrives and testifies that following Vinny's request, he identified 2 men fitting Bill and Stan's descriptions who have been arrested in Georgia for driving a stolen Pontiac Tempest and were in possession of a gun matching that of the murder weapon. His case is dismantled. Trotter requests that Holler dismisses all charges. Bill, Stan, the sheriff, Trotter, and Holler congratulate Vinny on his success. Driving away, Lisa admits that she had Judge Malloy help convince Holler of Jerry Callow's successful legal career before she and Vinny bicker about their wedding plans. After all that, it's reduced to them bickering like a would-be married couple as the credits roll.
You won't see that in the South.
I do love the physical comedy of we finally get a side shot of Joe Pesci standing next to Fred Gwynn. And, Fred Gwynn just looks like he could beat the shit out of him if he wanted to. And win some, lose some. I thought that was good too. But I mean, I've seen a movie before, Julio. I knew as soon as he got Marisa Tomei into the courtroom what was going to happen. Yeah,
well, and also, like I said, I've seen the Oscar clip, so I actually knew that she was going to be talking about cars. Here's my question, Alex. This is the plot hole that kind of throws away the whole thing. How does he's not an expert. She is the expert. How does Joe Pesci know what he's looking at when he's looking at the picture with the tire tracks? Because he looks at the picture, he notices something, and then that's how he knows he needs to put Marisa Tomei on the stand. So are you telling me that he is as good an expert in cars as she is? You know what I mean? Like, how did he know that he was looking at something that would break the case? It would be different if Marisa Tomei is the one that's looking at the picture and she realizes it and then she tells him. But he's just a dude that went to law school, right? It distracted me the entire time. I was like, wait, if he knew all this, why couldn't he just say it himself? Can he put himself on the stand? Is that a thing? Can he just do that? Okay, no, I would just call. What he should have done is, instead of putting Marisa Tomei on the stand and treating her like a hostile witness, he just needed to call. He needed to do what he did after that. He needed to call the guy from the game, the other expert, and just ask him the same questions and just unleash that knowledge. I mean, I understand that Marisa Tomei needs her Oscar clip, but that's what would have made more sense. Instead, this was just distracting. Joe Pesci, you already knew this. Why are you putting on a show here?
Thank you. No more questions.
We didn't even get to mention that guy in this, Chris Ellis, who plays JT of That Thing You Do and Dark Knight Rises fame, who gets Superman punched by Joe Pesci at one point in this movie. I guess there was just too much going on that must have slipped our minds.
Superman punched. I thought it was a Shoryuken. My note just says Joe Pesci's not Ryu.
He's also in The Devil's Rejects, man. He's been around in the Contrarians history. So
that's another running joke that goes on forever. The $200 that this guy owes Pesci, and they keep postponing their fight, and then when they finally fight, it's just a one-punch thing, and I was like, oh, that's it? We're done with it? Man, they really dragged this punchline.
Joe Pesci just going, tiger uppercut, motherfucker. Well, Joe Pesci's won his case. He finally won one. And speaking of winning one, Marisa Tomei won not just one, but 2 significant awards for her performance. And I'm curious, Julio, how you feel about this movie as a first-time viewing.
Oh, I got one more. I had to look over my notes. I was like, there's one other plot hole. This guy really just dropped the ball when he got to the third act. Marisa Tomei called the judge that Joe Pesci's mentor, right, in New York, so that he could lie. He could send a fax to Herman Munster. And she's like, yeah. So she basically got him to lie about this lawyer, Callow. But she didn't know that was the last name that Joe Pesci had given Herman Munster, right? Herman Munster calls him into his chambers and tells him, hey, you are dead. This guy, Gallo, is dead. And Pesci's like, no, not Gallo, Callow with a C. And then Fred Gwynne goes, all right, well, I'm going to call. We're going to sort this out right now. And they postpone until 3 o'clock. Then what we see is Joe Pesci is at this diner, and then Marisa Tomei comes up to him, and she's like, what happened? And Joe Pesci says, he found out that Gallo's dead. And they don't speak about that any longer because then Joe Pesci goes off on her and then she storms off. So he never told her, but I told him that my last name is Callow now. And yet somehow she knows this when she calls the judge in New York to vouch for Joe Pesci. How does she know, Alex?
But why'd I have the ball, Bart? Why did I have the ball?
Maybe that's why they're meant to be together, Julio.
True love knows no boundaries when it comes to knowledge.
I honestly didn't even catch that, so well played.
I mean, not well played for the screenwriter. I guess because I was wondering what happened, right? Like, Fred Gwynne shows up with the computer printout, and then he shakes Joe Pesci's hand. And I thought that meant that Fred Gwynne had decided that he didn't care. It was like, look, I know you're a fake, right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
You kicked ass in that courtroom, so let me shake your hand. And I was kind of like ready to live with that as they're driving away. But then they bring it up, and Marisa Tomei is like, no, I called your old mentor, and I told him something that I had no way of knowing. I was like, God damn it. Now it doesn't work. So thankfully, Marisa Tomei's performance kind of lets you forgive a lot. So that is something that not even Contrarians Corner can diminish, I think. The power of Marisa Tomei and My Cousin Vinny. Now, everything else is up for grabs, Alex.
With that being said, Julio, are you ready to move for dismissal and head on over to Real Talk?
Ready to declare a mistrial.
They better get their heads together or they're gonna slap a leather where their heart's in the back.